Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah wa alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Sorry guys about I'm changing, like maybe I should change the way I'm doing it. This one is much more convenient for me actually to write it on paper. Writing it on the board is much difficult, so I'm sorry about that, okay? So today, let's just review this argument I just made. So this argument is to further disambiguate the language. I already told you, see, they always want to get around it some way, but we can use clear argumentation and reason to come to some conclusions, okay? So this is the argument I presented. I can understand, what's it called, argumentation. Maybe, I don't follow the rules, but the argument will still be sound, okay? I've thought about it, okay? Now, the first premise is this. God is a divine being, okay? God is a divine being. Or a divine being is God, okay? This is premise 1. Premise 2 says, anyone that is not a divine being is not God, okay? So anyone that is not a divine being is not God. Now, premise 3, divine being, I'm defining it. I don't know if it's premise, but I'm defining it. Divine being just means possessing all divine attributes intrinsically, or all what is necessary to be God. So a person possesses all divine attributes necessarily, okay? Now, premise 4 says, if we ask, is person X, a particular person, a divine being? If you say no, it's not a divine being, then P2, premise 2 says, anyone that is not a divine being is not God, therefore it cannot be God. If you say yes, person X is a divine being, then person X is God, okay? God is divine being, okay? Now, if we now go to this question, I just want to use it. So now, is Jesus a divine being? We can ask that question. Is Jesus a divine being? If you say no, he's not a divine being, then P2, anyone that is not a divine being is not God. So what about the Father and Son? We will ask the same question. And if the answer comes out, so the Father is not a divine being, the Son is not a divine being, therefore, premise 2, anyone that is not a divine being is not God. Okay, now, if you say yes, Jesus is a divine being, then P1, then Jesus is God, okay? A divine being is God. Then we now ask the same question about all the persons of the Trinity. So we ask the Father and the Son also. If we say, if they are also divine beings, therefore you have 3 divine beings and you have 3 gods. So when you say this language of, let me write it on another paper. When you hear this argument of three persons and 1 being, okay? So the question is, are the persons divine beings or not? If they are not divine beings, remember the argument. Because a divine being is God. If you are not a divine being, you cannot be God, okay? So if all the persons are not divine beings, therefore they cannot be God. So the only thing that will be God will be this one divine being. Then the persons will not. Such that, does that even make any sense? Like the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Okay, they are not divine. They are not divine beings. So this one divine being, what is it? We don't know. What is it like? Such that they will be inferior to the one divine being. And if you understand like some Platonic philosophy, in Platonic philosophy, they can still be divine, but in a lesser sense. This will be if you read Plato, there's something called the form of the perfect form. So this is a perfect form, and these are the particulars. That will be the consequence. Such that this form will be something that is transcendent and unreachable, and the persons will just be participating in the form of this, and they will be less inferior to this form, such that they cannot be called gods, because God by definition cannot be inferior to anything. Okay, such that this will be the only God here. Do you see how absurd that is? Okay, so I just wanted to show you that, but you get the argument, such that you trying not to say that Jesus is not a divine being or the Father is not a divine being. I should actually ask the Father, because the Father is much more, people are much more comfortable to accept the Father as God than any other person, even in history, okay? So I should have asked the Father, okay? If you put the Father here, so is the Father a divine being? And you say, no, the Father is not a divine being. Then what is the Father? Okay? The Father has to be a divine being, Okay, because the Jews, they believe in the Father. They believe the Father is God. Okay, so the Father is the divine being. So now you see how you can show this and come out. Them not try. So they'll say we are not saying three beings. Remember, they say we are not saying three beings. If you say you're not saying three beings, you are just saying the three of them are not. They are less of a being. Okay, is it that they are not beings, or they are lesser of a being? Okay, because they have to be something. What are they? You know, we need to ask what. Okay, for example, a human. See a human. I'm looking at the camera to write this. So you have a human. A human being just means what? The same thing applies. See, if we put human here, a human is a human being. Okay, a human being is human. Okay, anyone that is not a human being is not human. Human being means possessing all attributes needed to be human. If we ask, is person X a human being? If you say no, then he's not a human. If you say yes, then he's a human. Do you see? He's a human being. Therefore, if you have 3A, B, okay, and C, these three humans now, if we ask, is A human being? You have to say yes, A is a human being. Is B a human being? Yes, B is a human being. Is C a human being? Yes, C is a human being. Therefore, you have three human beings. Okay? Do you see how you can show this? This is similar, okay? So this is the idea. I just hope you guys understand this argument. So I think I'll use this more for my my Dawah series I'm making. I prefer to use paper. It's much more flexible, and I can move around a little much more easier. So assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Share this with your friends, like the video, and subscribe.